Hi guys, this is Darby Blaylock. I'm from Group 2, and today we're going to be going over personal health and safety. The other members in my group that will be presenting today with me is Gracie Beth Butler, Ansley Hines, Sydney Boarding, and Marley Wells. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to be looking at today is safety products, devices, and symbols. It's important to use visuals while teaching this material because this will help students to see and understand what they need to be looking for while ensuring their safety. It's also important to teach students procedures before a drill. This can reduce any chaos or confusion that the students may have during the drill. So, for example, if you know that your school is conducting a fire drill that morning, go through with the students what you expect of them and the procedures that will be followed, such as how they need to line up, how they need to be quiet in the hallways, and where their class will be going outside to stand during the fire drill. And practice makes perfect for students. Students will only get better at learning the drills the more they practice their procedures and go over them. And the same goes for their safety symbols. The more they look at them and see them and hear them, they will understand how to ensure their safety while going through drills or looking at procedures. Lastly, it's important for students to understand the color that goes along with the safety signs because sometimes your students may not be able to read the signs or understand what the symbols mean on them. So on the PowerPoint, I have the colors and what the colors stand for. So green stands for safety first, yellow stands for caution, red stands for danger, orange stands for warning, and blue stands for notice. And it's important for students to understand why these colors go with the symbols. Alright, so this is just a continuation for safety products, devices, and symbols. It's important to go over the different type of signs with your students so they're familiar with them and know what they mean. So on this slide, I just have some example ones that your students can see and need to know what they are. I have a stop sign, a crosswalk sign, a handicap sign, the railroad track sign, caution, exit, a wet floor sign, and a no diving sign. And these are just some of the signs that your students seem to be familiar with, but there are definitely some more. So the next topic that we're going to be talking about is reporting dangerous behaviors to adults. So I have a couple of bullet points about how you can teach this to your students. The first thing that's really important is that you need to create a safe environment for your students so they feel comfortable telling you anything that may be going on dangerous in the classroom. It's also important that they feel that you are a trusted adult and they know what a trusted adult is so that they can go to someone when they feel like something is going on. The next thing that's really important is to clarify with students what is a dangerous behavior and what is not a dangerous behavior. With younger students, there's always a problem with tattling versus telling. They get confused with what a tattle is and what an actual dangerous behavior is, so they need to understand the difference between what reporting is and how serious it can be. It's also important to be clear with your students about what exactly a dangerous behavior is by giving them some examples of what really needs to be reported. This can be students harming one another, if you have a bully in your classroom, if you have a student having violent outbursts, or maybe even a student that's stealing supplies and another student knows about it. It's important for them to know that they need to come report that to their teacher or any trusted adult. It's also important to note that as future educators that we're going to be mandatory reporters for our students, so it's important to teach our students how they can be reporters as well if anything's dangerous going on, and that it's their job if something's going on to let an adult know so we can fix the problem for them. The next topic that we're going to be talking about is weapon safety. So first, when you're going over with this topic in your classroom, you need to tell students what a weapon is. A weapon is designed to cause harm to another human. So they need to know it's important not to bring these in schools and to be very careful if they're ever around any type of weapon. I would tell my classroom that a weapon is a firearm or a knife, and I also think it's important to go over with your students about look-alike weapons. A lot of children may even have these laying around at home, especially young boys, which would be like a Nerf gun or an airsoft gun. If these are found at school, if they were to bring one at school, they would be treated like they are an actual weapon, so they need to know that those need to stay at home. I also found an acronym which is called Be Smart. So S stands for secure, M stands for model, A stands for ask, R stands for recognize, and T stands for tell. I think it's important when talking about weapon safety to go over this acronym with your students because they could easily remember it. And next, it's important to talk about with your students what to do if they see a weapon at school. So they need to know clearly what a weapon is. You also need to go over with your students that if they see a weapon that they need to remove themselves from the situation as quickly as possible and then come tell a trusted adult and tell the adult who the person is that has the weapon. And lastly, go over with your students how important it is for them to tell a trusted adult if they see somebody with a weapon to reduce any further problems.
Hey, so my name is Gracie Beth, and I'm going to be talking about risky behavior for health and safety. What is risky behavior? Let's start with that. So, risky behavior is any behavior that could lead to a disease or an injury. It can also lead to a disability, death, and even social problems. There are 6 main categories for risky behavior: tobacco use, alcohol, sex, drugs, violence, and insufficient physical activity. And we're going to talk more about those on the next slide. So we're going to be starting with the first of the 6 main categories of risky behavior, which is tobacco. Tobacco is anything that has nicotine in it. So cigars, cigarettes, dip, chew, nicotine pouches that you can use instead of dip or chew, and even e-cigarettes. E-cigarettes are so popular right now among kids my age and kids younger than me. I'm only 20 years old, and there's so many people my age that use these. And I think it's because the industry is targeting kids like me. They're using fun, fruity flavors like cotton candy, Skittles, peach, apple, and they're also using bright, fun coloring in their packaging and even glitter. Which, of course, anybody that sees bright, fun coloring and it's flavored peach, they're going to think that's great for you, and that's just not the case. In fact, it actually causes mental illnesses like anxiety and depression. And there's so many better activities that we could be doing instead of hitting a pop or using nicotine to solve those problems. The next is alcohol. Alcohol is anything that contains a percentage of alcohol, like beer, wine, mixed drinks, and they offer a variety of those things nowadays. Alcohol impairs your ability to make good decisions. So even when you can't walk, talk, or see straight, you think that drunk driving is a good idea, and in reality, it's just not. Drunk driving is actually one of the leading causes of death in America right now, and that's just a really sad thing to think about. Sexual intercourse is the third main topic of risky behaviors. Sexual intercourse is known to be one of the easiest ways to spread disease, and that's why you should always think about who it is that you're going to have sexual intercourse with, and you should always wear protection. Our last 3 main categories are found on the next slide. Our next main topic is drugs. There are a variety of different kinds of drugs like marijuana, opioids, acid, cocaine, and even fentanyl. Fentanyl is currently causing millions of deaths because you can lace all of these other drugs with fentanyl and it becomes 10 times more deadly. What drugs does to a person is it causes them to have impaired judgment and reasoning, and it also creates behaviors in the person that they normally wouldn't have if they weren't on these drugs. The next topic is violence. And I just want to start by saying that any kind of violence is never okay, but I think the best way to beat violence is to meet that violence with positivity, because when you do that, the person that created the violence begins to feel a little bit of guilt inside. I think the majority of violence that we see today is through cyberbullying. I think it takes a confrontation out of violence pretty much, because you can say these horrible things online and then never even have to see that person face to face. The 6th main category for risky behaviors is insufficient physical activity. Insufficient physical activity is currently the leading risk factor for death. Physical activity is a need, not a want. A human being needs to be physically active. When you are not physically active, not only do you risk becoming obese, but you risk facing heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and even cancer. My next topic is basic first aid skills. So what is basic first aid skills? Basic first aid skills means that you have the ability and the means to provide help during a medical emergency until the medical professionals get there. So basic first aid skills include CPR, the Heimlich maneuver, how to identify anaphylactic shock, how to use an EpiPen, and even how to spot a concussion. The last topic that I will be discussing in this slideshow is responding to emergencies. The best thing you can do to respond to emergency is to plan ahead. Put those procedures in place on the very first day of school with your students. I remember as a student, my teacher would always designate one person to run and go get the nurse, one person to call 911 and one person to be on crowd control and make sure that the other students aren't crowding around the student experiencing the medical emergency. Along with these procedures, you should also show students the medical kit that's located in your classroom on the first day of school. Not only show it to them and tell them how to get there, but also show them the items inside and how to use each item. While every school has a school nurse, what if the nurse is unavailable that day? That's why every teacher should be trained in how to handle medical emergencies. As a teacher, you may have a student that experiences medical emergencies regularly. Maybe they have seizures or have severe allergies. And that's why you should have, for that student, you should have an individual emergency care plan put in place. This allows you as a teacher to provide that student with the medicine they need during their time of need.
Hey, I'm Ansley Hines, and the first thing I'm going to talk about is media and technology. Media and technology need to be talked about when considering personal health and safety within our students because they are so prevalent within society today. As you can see on the screen, there are many positive and negative effects of personal health and safety with media and technology, but with the right resources and the right teaching, we can teach our students how to manage their media and technology in a way to keep them safe. The next thing I'm going to talk about is benefits of sleep, nutrition, and exercise. As teachers, it is so important that we teach how vital it is to get the proper sleep, nutrition, and exercise that our students need in order to grow physically, emotionally, and mentally. When our students grow in these areas, it aids us in helping them grow in their education in our classroom. The final thing I'm going to discuss is goal setting. It is so important for us teachers to implement goal setting into our lessons and into our classrooms because it is something students are going to be doing every day for the rest of their life, whether it's at home, at school, at work, whatever they may be doing, they're always going to be setting goals for themselves or for others. When we set goals, we are helping our students set goals. We are teaching planning skills, helping them create blueprint for working towards objectives, and we're also helping teach perseverance.
Hey, my name is Sydney Borden, and I am going to be talking about the impact of communicable diseases on physical, psychological, environmental, and social health, refusal skills, and problem solving. So, my first slide is on communicable diseases, and these are any type of sicknesses that are spread from one person to another. These diseases can be spread in a variety of ways. I have some listed. They can be spread by contact with bodily fluids, like blood, breathing in an airborne virus, being bitten by an insect, or consuming contaminated foods. Examples of communicable diseases are chickenpox, hepatitis A, B, and C, salmonella, measles, or AIDS, and HIV. So now I'm going to be talking about the impact of communicable diseases on different types of health. The first one is the physical impact that it has, and when talking about this, the first thing that comes to mind is definitely attendance. So to keep this impact down, there's a lot of things you can do. First of all, you can tell students to wash their hands. You need to make sure that they know how to wash their hands properly, 20 seconds with lots of soap and lots of warm water. Next, you can stress the importance of staying at home when they're sick. So you need to make sure that they are comfortable with staying at home and making sure that they are able to get their work done and they know that you're going to help them get their work done when they miss. And lastly, you need to tell students to speak up when they are not feeling well at school. Next, I'm going to talk about the impact of communicable diseases on environmental health. This impact can be controlled by the teacher by sanitizing all classroom items, so desks, pencils, markers, anything that students are touching definitely needs to be sanitized pretty frequently. The teacher should also be keeping harmful chemicals out of the reach of students. Lastly, the teacher can work by improving the air quality of their classroom to keep students healthy. Next, I'm going to be talking about the impact that communicable diseases can have on our psychological health. This is going to be a really big deal in your classroom because this is the branch of health that deals with your mental health. So to make sure that this is a positive impact in your classroom, you as the teacher can model for students how to deal with stress. These are really young kids and they have probably not been put under a lot of stress before, so it's really important for them to see you deal with stress so that they know how to deal with it in a healthy way. Next, you can ensure that all missing work is provided to the student. I know that this is something that I really struggled with in grade school. I think from grades 2 to 4, I had perfect attendance just because I was so nervous and anxious about missing school. And the last bullet point kind of goes along with that. Make sure that students are provided help with missing work. That is something else that I was really, really, really stressed about in school. I was so scared that I would be sent home an assignment that I had no idea how to do. So, those are 3 really important things that you can do to deal with psychological health in your classroom. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the impact that communicable diseases can have on our social health in the classroom. To prevent this impact as a teacher, you can tell students to check on their sick friends. So you can tell them to give them a call, send them a text, make sure that their friend is doing okay. And lastly, you can make sure that sick students take time off from school. It is important that these students get rest so that they can heal their bodies and get back in school and learn. So my next topic is refusal skills, and refusal skills are methods or strategies that a person can use to say no in peer pressure situations. So some examples of these skills are making an excuse as to why you can't do something, giving a reason that this activity is a bad idea, suggesting an alternative activity, and one of the most important is my 4th bullet, plainly and firmly just saying no, that I do not want to do this and that I'm not comfortable doing this. And then lastly, you can leave the situation. An important note about refusal skills is that you need to make sure that your students know that you are there for them and that they can come to you with any kind of peer pressure issues. When you have comfortable students, you have safe students, because comfortable students are going to come to you and tell you their problems so that you can help them fix them. The last topic that I'm going to be covering in this presentation is problem solving. Problem solving when it comes to health is managing all health issues to the best of your ability. To teach problem solving to your students, there are many different things you can do. The first thing is to make sure your students know to notify an adult when someone is injured. This includes falling on the playground, any kind of injury that can be helped by your teacher. Next, you can make sure that your students know to visit the school nurse for any symptoms of sickness. This means that if they have a headache, if their stomach's hurting, they need to know that they need to tell you that they need to go to the nurse. Next, you can make sure your students know that they need to wash their hands frequently. I know that I mentioned this earlier in my presentation, but this is one of the most important things that students can do. It keeps everyone safe and everyone healthy. Next, you can make sure that students know simple first aid for minor issues like band-aids, wraps, ice. All they have to do is notify their teacher and that they will be provided with these things. Something important to note about problem solving is that if problem solving is taught correctly in the classroom, the teacher will be notified of any problems right as they happen so that every student is safe and healthy.
Hi, I am Marley Wells, and in the next couple slides, I'll be discussing the dimensions of health. So there are 5 dimensions of health, and these dimensions include physical, emotional, social, spiritual, and intellectual. So the physical dimension will include getting plenty of exercise, eating healthy, avoiding drug and alcohol use, and getting 6 to 8 hours of sleep. The emotional dimension will include maintaining a positive attitude, sharing your feelings with a trusted friend, and seeking professional help when needed. So basically just taking care of your mental health. So to continue our discussion on the dimensions of health, the social dimension will include the balance of social life and academics, recognizing unhealthy relationships, which can include friendships or romantic relationships, and getting involved in the community. The spiritual dimension will include finding a quiet place to spend time throughout the day, spending time appreciating the world around you, and if you have a religion, practicing it daily. Also, another good one for spiritual would be meditating, if that's something you would like to do. For the intellectual dimension, this would include take school and work seriously, seeking academic help when needed, and keeping all your responsibilities in order. So the final thing that I will be talking about is our friends with special needs and the concerns about contact. So personal health and hygiene is one of the most important skills taught to our friends with various disabilities. So students with disabilities often need instruction in proper bathing, brushing hair and teeth, using the restroom, covering their mouth and nose when coughing or sneezing, and washing hands. Continue our discussion about our friends with special needs and our concerns about contact with them. So because of many of our friends with disabilities require instruction on personal health skills, it is in our hands to be mindful when we're coming in contact with them. Also to mention, many of these students could be immunocompromised, and we do not want to give them any sickness that we may be carrying. When spending time or helping our friends, we should wash our hands before and after to ensure we do not give them anything that we have, and we do not take anything away that they may have. To ensure this happens with our students, we should encourage students to always wash their hands when they come in contact with anybody, but especially to wash their hands before they help a student with disabilities so they do not spread their germs to them.
Alright, so now that we have gone through the bulk of what needs to be covered while teaching personal health and safety to students, it's important to know how we can use this in the classroom. So, on our next couple of slides, we're going to be talking about some lesson plan ideas that you can use to teach this material to your students, and we'll have it listed from kindergarten through 6th grade. Alright, now that we've gone over all the content, we're going to talk about how we can teach it and how to implement it into lesson plans in our classrooms. So first we have kindergarten, and the standard that I picked out is demonstrate healthy behaviors to prevent injuries. I also have 3 books that I think that would go along pretty good with this content. The first book is called This Is How We Stay Safe. So this will just walk kids through some simple ways of how they can stay safe and how to avoid any injury. The next book I have is called Stop, Wait, Go. So this will walk students through when they're at a stoplight, how they stop when it's red, how to go when it's green, and just some other different signs and symbols that they need to be aware of. And the last book I have is called Arthur's Fire Drill. And I would read this to my students before having a fire drill just so they know what to expect and it's not the first time they've seen something. And then I also have 2 websites listed that I think would also go along good with this content. So the first one is an online game for students, and they will just go online and practice their different safety symbols. It's kind of like a matching game. And then the next resource I have is a traffic light song. So when you click on this link, it'll just take you to a resource that teachers can use, and it's just a song that they could teach their students about learning all the traffic lights. So on this slide, I'm going to be talking about how I would integrate some of the health standards into some core subject areas and some lesson plan ideas for kindergarten students. So the first one I have is math, and I think that it would be a good idea to incorporate the health standards about students learning the different traffic signs and symbols while they're learning about shapes in math so they can make different connections. For example, a caution sign is typically in the shape of a triangle, so I would just teach this to students and they could start making those connections between their shapes and the signs. The next lesson plan idea I had is an English one, and I think it'd be pretty easy to incorporate health into English lessons by doing a read aloud. So I would start with a read aloud, and you could use some of the ones that I had in my last slide. So the one that I would choose to do would probably be Arthur's Fire Drill. And I would read this book to students knowing that we had a fire drill coming up so they would know what to expect. And after I read the students the book, I would have them retell the story in small groups. And so they're all on the same page about what's going on, but they're also being informed about how procedures work. And the last lesson plan idea I had is for art. And this would also be very easy to incorporate some health lessons into. So on the last slide for one of the websites I had a traffic light song resource for teachers. So this would be me using it in the classroom, and I would teach students the song, maybe even put some dance moves with it, and have them learn how to sing and dance to it. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about first grade and how to apply this into the classroom. So the standard I have for first grade is determine behaviors that avoid or reduce injury, and some examples that the standard actually gives would be importance of riding in the back seat, the meaning of traffic signs, and safe pedestrian behaviors. So to go along with this standard, I actually picked out 3 books. The first book is called What If Everybody Did That? And I think that this is a great book to incorporate into the classroom, not only for health, but just for students to learn the simple lesson of why we have rules set in place. So this book will just walk kids through what if everybody broke the rules and how would the world be. So it shows them the importance of why we do have procedures set in place to reduce any injuries. The next book I have is called I Can Be Safe. So this will just walk kids through some simple scenarios of how they can be safe and avoid any danger. And then the last book that I have listed is called Runaway Signs. And this is also a really cute book. In this book, all the signs run away, and then all the people are left with no signs and don't know what to do without them. So this will show kids how important our safety signs and symbols really are. I also have some websites listed that could be used while teaching this content to first grade students. The first one I have is just a simple safety symbols worksheets that you could print off and your students could do in class. The next one I have is actually a teacher resource, and this would just be helpful to any teachers who are going over safety signs and symbols for their students, kind of a refresher and to go over what's really important with your kids. And then the last one is a safety video for first grade students. And so this would just be a good video to use to have your students watch and this so they can understand the material and understand why safety signs are so important and why we use them to reduce injuries. Okay, so on this slide, we are going to be talking about some lesson plan ideas for first grade students and how we can incorporate health into some of the core subject areas. So the first lesson plan idea I had is for an English lesson, and this is similar to what I said for kindergarten. I think it's really easy to incorporate a read aloud to get some of the health information across because there are really good books that cover some of the standards for health. So I would start with a read aloud, and then I would have students have a discussion after. So for example, one of the books for first grade that I listed was Runaway Signs, which was that really cute book about how all the signs ran away and then nobody knew what to do, and how that alludes to how important our safety signs and symbols are. So after reading this book, I would have students discuss about that and explain how they think and how they understand how important safety signs are. And then the next lesson plan idea I have would be for art. So students would be cutting out and coloring and gluing different safety symbols.
I chose to do a second grade standard. The standard that I chose is describe why avoiding tobacco is a healthy behavior. I chose 3 websites to show you guys today, but there are plenty out there and they're all wonderful. The first one that I chose is dare.org. I remember doing DARE as a kid, and I remember absolutely loving it and thinking that it was the coolest thing ever because a police officer got to come into our classroom and do activities with us and really educate us on why drugs are bad for you and how to say no to drugs and things like that. The next website that I chose is a YouTube video. This YouTube video was really cool to me because it explained the background of Red Ribbon Week and why we celebrate that week. It also provides context that Red Ribbon Week should not only happen for 1 week, it should happen throughout the whole year. We should encourage our students to say no to drugs throughout the whole year, not just one specific week. The next website I chose is kidshealth.org, and this is a lesson plan idea where students can write a persuasive postcard. And they will write this persuasive postcard to someone who smokes or does tobacco, and they will persuade them to stop smoking. The books that I chose are Smoking Stinks, which is about a girl whose granddad is sick because he smokes. And she shares this concern with her classmates, and they find out all the different reasons why smoking stinks or why smoking is bad for you. The next book I chose is You Can Say No to Drugs, and this is about all the different ways that you can say no and just provides kids with a lot of context in that area. The next book I chose is No, and I Mean No. This book allows kids to see how to say no again, and it also has these characters where whenever they say no, they become superheroes. So really, really cool. Here is how I would implement the standard, describe why avoiding tobacco is a healthy behavior into different lesson ideas. So first is an ELA lesson, and this would be completed during Red Ribbon Week. I would have students write out kind of like a pledge, and this pledge worksheet says, I say no to drugs so I can say yes to. And they would fill out all the different things that they can do that they wouldn't be able to do if they did tobacco or other drugs. The next lesson that I have is an art lesson, and this includes many different ideas. There are so many out there. The first is a self-portrait, so it says, I'm drug-free, and they get to draw themselves drug-free, smiling, very happy. And the next is a coloring contest. This coloring sheet has a key on it, and it says, my future is key, say no to drugs. And they would complete this at the beginning of the week, and they would color it, and then our principal or someone besides myself would pick out the winner, and the winner would get maybe a crown or some kind of fun treat. The next is pledge to be drug-free. This would be our classroom pledge. I would have them paint their hand red, or I would paint their hand red probably, and we would stamp our hands onto a big sheet of paper and say, I pledge to be drug-free, and their hand is like their signature. The next that I have is classroom door decorating. I remembered all of the classroom doors being decorated during Red Ribbon Week. And so I would get my students involved in this. I would ask their opinions. What do they think? We'd look it up on Pinterest, and we'd decide our door decorations together. And just a way to have our classroom be more of a community in that way. I also chose a third grade standard. The third grade standard that I chose is examine the harmful effects of tobacco, drugs, and alcohol on the body. Though I chose 3 websites, but of course there are plenty out there that you can use. The first website that I chose is from asklistenlearn.org. On this website, students can navigate it themselves, which is great. There are different tabs that give all the different organs of the body, and each tab explains how alcohol affects that specific organ. The next website that I chose is also from Ask, Listen, Learn, but this is a lesson plan on how marijuana affects your growing body. This lesson plan is very good. It's very detailed. It gives you discussion questions to ask, standards that are met, a quiz, and my favorite part is at the very end, it gives you an activity to do. In this activity, students are breaking the code. There is a code that is given from one organ and it's trying to get to the brain. However, this code is impaired by THC. So students have to break the code that's impaired by THC in order to get the brain to tell the organ what to do. I also chose a YouTube video. In this YouTube video, students learn about how alcohol affects the central nervous system. I have 3 books that I chose. The first is Gracie's Guide. This is about a girl named Gracie who goes on a field trip and is asked if she wants to smoke a cigarette. And it goes through all the different ways that she says no and how she stands up to this girl who is peer pressuring her into smoking a cigarette. Again, I chose Smoking Stinks just because I think it is a great book and very helpful to kids learning why smoking is bad for you. The next book that I chose is very cute. It is No Smoking, No Drinking, No Drugs. This book is about a little boy who is about to make a bad decision, and all of a sudden this mouse appears and his name is Mr. Consequence. Mr. Consequence tells this little boy all the bad things that will happen if he smokes, drinks, or does drugs. For my lesson plan ideas on the standard examine the harmful effects of tobacco, drug, and alcohol on the body, I chose a science lesson. In this science lesson, we would do an experiment on a good lung and a bad lung, and I included a picture here. So what would happen is there's a balloon tied at the bottom, and if you pull the bottom of the Coke bottle, the lungs inflate because they are sucking air through the straws at the top. However, the lung that is black does not inflate. And so once we did this experiment, students would create this on their own. I would have students record their research and then research why the black lung didn't inflate. What causes smoking to have people have black lungs? I also did a music lesson. In this music lesson, I would show kids a hip-hop song about saying no to drugs, and then I would have the kids work in a group of 4 and they would create their own song about saying no to drugs. And if they felt comfortable, I would ask them to share their song in front of the class. And we would have a full day of learning about different songs of how to say no to drugs.
For 4th grade, I chose the standard Describe Health Advocacy Strategies. With this, there are so many different resources that you can use to teach the importance of sleep, nutrition, and exercise. The first website I chose was sleepforkids.org. On this website, students can get on there and research information about sleep, whether it's why I can't sleep, what is the importance of sleep, and so much more. There are also fun games and activities for the students as well. The next website is healthyeating.org. This website is more of a resource for teachers. However, students can get on this website as well. On this website, there are lesson plans, activities, papers for students to work on, slideshows, and so much more. And then the final website I chose was gonoodle.com. And on this website, students can get on there and participate in interactive activities. And with these activities, they learn about the benefits of exercise. Teachers can even get on there and implement a quiz in between each of the videos to make sure the kids are really paying attention, but typically they do because it's a fun activity for them. For the books, the first one I chose is Rest to Recharge. This is by Jennifer Law, and in this book, it just looks at the seriousness of getting sleep to recharge for the day. It provides tips on sleep and so much more. It's a really good book for students to read. The next one is Exercise. In this book, it is just about focusing on physical activity and making sure that you are getting the exercise that you need. And then the final one is Eat Your Greens. And this book is really just a cookbook for kids, and it helps them learn about how they need to eat the colors of the rainbow. For our 4th grade lesson, there are so many different ways that you can implement the idea of exercise, healthy eating, and proper sleep. Again, the standard is Describe Health Advocacy Strategies. The 2 lesson ideas that I wrote down, however, there are so many more. One of them was a social studies lesson, and with this, students would be taught the history of broadcast and how they work by the teacher, and then the students would research benefits of sleep, exercise, and proper nutrition. Then they would create their own broadcast that they would share with the community, which would actually be their classmates. This is a great way to implement something that students are going to see as they grow older, but it's something that they can use in the classroom to learn. The second one is an English language art strategy. Students would just write a small paper about the importance of sleep, exercise, and proper nutrition by describing the health advocacy strategies. For 5th grade, I chose to implement 2 standards. The first one is a counselor standard, which is learn how to set goals, and the second one is a health standard, which is implement a variety of healthy practices and behaviors that avoid or reduce health risks. One thing that is strongly encouraged and taught within the school system is SMART goals. And so that's the way I kind of went with this slideshow was with SMART goals. 2 of the websites that I found were solely based around SMART goals. The first one is Atlassian.com, and this website, like I said, it just provides ways that you can implement SMART goals, how you can teach SMART goals, and how students can learn what SMART goals are. Same thing with Khan Academy. It's just a similar resource, and it does the same things. The books that I chose were the 3 down in the bottom right hand corner, and the first one is Salt in His Shoes, and this is a book about Michael Jordan, and this book just says information about how he overcame different struggles and how he set goals for himself to get where he is today. The second book is Ruby's Wish. This is about a girl who had a place set in mind for where she wanted to go to school, and she reached for that goal and achieved it. And the last one is Thank You, Mr. Falker. And this is about a girl who struggles with dyslexia, and the teacher helps her overcome this struggle by setting goals. For a teacher, there are many different ways that they can implement the idea of setting goals into their lesson. For 5th grade, I just wanted to share a few. Again, the standards are, the first one is a counselor standard, learning how to set goals. And the second one is a health standard, implement a variety of healthy practices and behaviors that avoid or reduce health risks. For the first lesson idea, it could be with art. Students could think of ideas of goals that they have for themselves, whether it's a goal in the near future or something way down the road. So that could be something as simple as making all A's on their tests this week, or maybe even making the basketball team in the future, or maybe it's even getting the job that they want way down the road. Anyway, any goal, this lesson idea could be implemented into the classroom. Students will think about the goals that they have set for themselves and draw a vision board for these goals. The second one is a social studies lesson. For this, students will discuss a classroom goal that they would like to set for themselves. They would set this at the beginning of the year and want to achieve this by the end of the year. Once the goal is determined, the students will sign the document and it will be displayed at the front of the classroom for them to see every single day, and even have visiting people look at as well. But this idea helps teach the idea of democracy. And so students are not only setting goals for themselves, but they're also learning about our country.
For my topic, I chose a 6th grade standard, and the standard that I chose says list the ways to reduce or prevent injuries or illnesses. Some websites to go along with the standard are brianschreck.org. This shows you a lot of programs and lessons and activities that you can do with your students about all of the topics that I've discussed. It gives you great ideas for lesson plans and gives you really engaging things that they can do. The next website that I chose is just the CDC, and it is the CDC's recommendation on hand washing, how long you should wash your hands, with warm water, with what kind of soap, all of that good stuff. Next, I chose 3 different books for this standard. I tried to choose books that were like 6th grade friendly. So the first book that I chose is called Teen Health. It just goes over like all different aspects of teen health. These 6th graders are entering into their teenage years, so they definitely need something like that. The next one that I chose is called Germ Smart. Germ Smart just goes over the different types of germs and how to get rid of them. And then lastly, I chose Meet Your Bacteria. That kind of goes along with Germ Smart. It kind of does the same thing, discusses different bacterias and how you can keep yourself from getting them. To implement the 6th grade standard, list ways to reduce or prevent injuries or illnesses, I would do a science lesson and an ELA lesson. For science, I would incorporate health into the lesson by having my students compare hand washing. So I would have one student wash their hands thoroughly with 20 seconds and a lot of soap, and then I would have one student not really wash their hands at all, and we would collect data off of each of their hands and compare them to each other. I would really think this is a good idea so my students can see how effective it is to wash your hands very, very well and how it can keep you safe from germs. The next lesson that I thought of was an ELA lesson, and this is 6th grade, so students really need to be working on their writing. So I thought that my students could list the ways that they can reduce or prevent injuries or illnesses in complete sentences. This way that their list isn't a complete sentence, so they're working on their grammar, their spelling, and their writing, and especially commas. That's going to be a really big thing when they get into middle school. They're going to have to start writing papers and paragraphs and responding to things very quickly. So I think that is something that they definitely need to learn and to be able to do well before they move on to middle school. This concludes Group 2's presentation on personal health and safety. Thank you for watching.